We're saving it for your sister. My father's words hung in the air of the wedding reception, magnified by the microphone he held during what was supposed to be his congratulatory toast. The elegant ballroom, decorated in the blush and gold colors I'd spent months selecting, suddenly felt airless. 300 guests sat in uncomfortable silence. Champagne flutes paused midway to lips, eyes darting between my father at the head table and me in my ivory gown. Just moments earlier, he had been praising the beautiful ceremony, welcoming my new husband James into the family, and reminiscing about my childhood. Then came the pivot that no one saw coming. As many of you know, our family has a tradition of giving each child a significant gift when they marry, he continued, seemingly oblivious to the tension rippling through the room. For generations, this has been $20,000 to help start their new life together. My stomach dropped. The wedding gift tradition was indeed real. My older brother Mark had received exactly that amount when he married 3 years ago, presented with a ceremonial check during his reception toast. James and I have factored this anticipated gift into our plans for a down payment on our first home, a modest condo we'd found just 15 minutes from our jobs in downtown Chicago. However, my father continued, his voice steady despite the murmurs now rising from the tables. After careful consideration, Eleanor's mother and I have decided that this money will be reserved for Abigail's wedding. Instead, Abigail, my younger sister by 4 years, the family favorite since the day she was born. Abby has always dreamed of a destination wedding in Italy, Dad explained, as if this justified everything, and with her engagement to Thomas last month, we want to make sure she has a wedding she deserves. We know Eleanor and James understand, being the practical couple they are. Practical, the word felt like an indictment. At 31, I had always been the sensible daughter, the one who'd put herself through graduate school, with scholarships and part-time jobs, who'd built a career in hospital administration, who'd chosen a classic wedding within our means rather than demanding extravagance. Being practical had always seemed like a virtue. Now, apparently, it was a reason I didn't deserve what my siblings received. James's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. His face remained composed, but I felt the tension in his grip. We had talked about that money, not expecting it exactly, but certainly hoping for it. The difference between a 10% and 20% down payment. The difference between mortgage insurance and none. The difference between starting our marriage on solid financial footing or stretched thin. My mother's face was unreadable from her seat beside my father. Had she known he would do this? Had this been her plan all along? Or a recent decision made when Abby and Thomas announced their engagement just weeks before my wedding? I forced my lips into what I hoped resembled a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. The room waited for my reaction, hundreds of eyes watching for any sign of hurt or anger. I wouldn't give them or my father the satisfaction. Thank you, Dad, for those unexpected words, I managed, standing and taking the microphone from his hand. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. James and I are so grateful to have all of you here to celebrate with us today. Practical or not, we've always believed that love and family are the true foundations of marriage. So please enjoy the evening, the open bar, and the fact that we splurged on the good champagne. A wave of relieved laughter broke the tension, and the reception lurched back into motion. The band, sensing the need to move things along, quickly started playing our chosen song for the father-daughter dance. Shall we? My father asked, extending his hand as if nothing had happened. For a split second, I considered refusing, creating a scene, demanding an explanation for why he would humiliate me at my own wedding. But 31 years of being the responsible one, the peacekeeper, the daughter who never caused problems, won out. Of course, I replied, placing my hand in his and allowing him to lead me to the dance floor. As we moved in practice steps, I had taken dance lessons with my father for this very moment. He leaned in close. Don't make this a bigger deal than it is, Ellie. You and James are doing fine. Abby and Thomas need this more than you do. Need is different from want. Dad, I replied quietly, maintaining my smile for the photographer circling us. And if that was the case, you could have told us privately, not announced it to everyone we know during your wedding toast. It would have come out eventually, he said dismissively. Better to address it head on. At my wedding. He sighed, impatience edging into his tone. You've always been so sensitive. This is exactly why your mother, and I knew you could handle this maturely. While Abby would have fallen apart, there it was, the familiar dynamic laid bare. My maturity wasn't actually valued, it was exploited. I could handle disappointment, so I received it in larger doses. The dance mercifully ended, and James immediately stepped in for our first dance as husband and wife. As he pulled me close, his lips brushed my ear. We're leaving as soon as we can do so politely. I've already told the planner to move up the cake cutting. Tears pricked up my eyes at his protectiveness. I'm sorry, I whispered. For what? Your father being a jerk? That's not on you, Elle. For the money. For believing we get it. For building it into our plans. James pulled back slightly to look me in the eyes, his gaze intense. We'll figure it out. We always do. But right now, I'm more concerned about you than our down payment. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of forced smiles and mechanical motions. We cut the cake, thanked guests, and posed for photographs. My sister Abby, stunning in her bridesmaid dress, seemed uncomfortable throughout. Though whether from knowledge of our parents' decision or general awkwardness, I couldn't tell. Around midnight, we finally made our escape to the honeymoon suite, paid for by James's parents as their wedding gift. The moment the door closed behind us, I kicked off my painful heels and collapsed onto the plush sofa. I can't believe he did that, I said, the composure I'd maintained all evening finally cracking. In front of everyone, James loosened his tie, his jaw tight with controlled anger. It was incredibly inappropriate and cruel. The worst part is I'm not even that surprised. I admitted. Abby has always been the favorite, the special one. That doesn't make it right, James said, sitting beside me, and it doesn't mean you have to accept it. I laughed humorlessly. What choice do I have? Throw a tantrum? Demand my fair share? That would just confirm their belief that they made the right choice giving it to Abby. The choice isn't between accepting it silently or throwing a tantrum, James pointed out. You could have a calm, reasoned conversation with them. Ask why they made this decision. Express how hurtful it was to be blindsided publicly. The suggestion was so sensible, so mature, exactly what I would have advised someone else in my situation. But when it came to my own family dynamics, rationality often abandoned me. They won't listen. They never do. Dad will say I'm being dramatic, and Mom will just back him up like always. James didn't argue, just pulled me into his arms. Then we moved forward on our own terms. We've never needed their approval or their money to build our life together. His confidence bolstered me. We had always been a team, facing challenges together since our first date 5 years ago. Our relationship had weathered job changes, a cross-country move, and the stress of wedding planning. We would weather this too. You're right, I said, trying to recapture the joy this day should have held. This doesn't change anything that matters. But as I lay awake hours later, James sleeping peacefully beside me, I couldn't shake the hurt. This wasn't just about money. It was about value, worth. My parents had made a calculation and determined that Abby's happiness was worth investing in, while mine was not. That I could be disappointed publicly without consequence, because being the practical daughter meant accepting whatever scraps of approval they deigned to offer. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text message at 3 a.m. I reached for it, expecting a late-night well-wish from a friend. Instead, it was from Abby. I didn't know about the money thing until Dad's toast. I'm so sorry, Elle. I never asked for this. Please call me tomorrow. I stared at the message, conflicted. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let my sister feel a fraction of the rejection I'd experienced. But another part recognized the genuine distress in her words. Abby and I had always had a complicated relationship, not hostile, but not particularly close either, separated by for years and our parents' obvious favoritism. I couldn't blame her for being the favorite any more than I could blame myself for not being chosen. Thanks for telling me, I typed back after a long moment. Not your fault. We'll talk later. Setting my phone down, I tried to focus on the positives. I had married the love of my life today. We had jobs we enjoyed, friends who supported us, and plans for our future that didn't depend on parental handouts. Many people had far less. So why did my chest still ache with a pain that felt physical in its intensity? Why couldn't I simply rise above this slight as I'd risen above so many others over the years? Because this time, the rejection hadn't been private. It had been declared, celebrated even, in front of everyone who mattered in our lives. Colleagues would whisper about it when I returned to work. Friends would exchange uncomfortable glances when my family was mentioned. The humiliation would linger long after the wedding flowers had wilted. As dawn broke over the Chicago skyline, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront my parents, not yet. I would proceed with our honeymoon as planned, a week in Quebec City that we had saved for ourselves. I would return to work, to our apartment, to the life we were building. But something fundamental had shifted. The daughter who always accommodated, who prioritized family harmony above her own needs, who accepted the role of practical, responsible Eleanor, she had reached her limit. I didn't know exactly what that meant for my relationship with my parents moving forward. But as I watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I knew one thing with certainty. Things would never be quite the same again. The honeymoon provided a welcome buffer from reality. For 7 days, James and I wandered the cobblestone streets of Old Quebec, sampling local cuisine, visiting museums, and deliberately not checking our phones more than once daily. It was a blissful cocoon of newlywed joy, unmarred by family drama or financial concerns. But on our final evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on the terrace of our quaint hotel, reality began to seep back in. "Have you decided what you're going to do about your parents?" James asked gently, refilling my glass. I sighed, watching the sunset over the ancient city walls. "Not really. Part of me wants to confront them directly. Another part wants to pretend it never happened and just gradually create distance. And what does the rest of you want?" James knew me well enough to recognize my tendency to overthink. To understand, I admitted. I keep replaying every interaction, trying to figure out when exactly they decided I was less deserving than Mark or Abby. Was it always this way? Did I miss the signs? James reached across the table to take my hand. "You know this isn't about deserving, right? This is about their issues, not yours." Logically, yes. Emotionally, I trailed off, unable to articulate the complicated tangle of feelings: inadequacy, resentment, confusion that had plagued me since the reception. "Have you talked to Abby yet?" I shook my head. Just that one text exchange. "She's called twice, but I let it go to voicemail. I'm not ready." "And your parents?" Radio silence. Mom sent a generic "hope you're enjoying your honeymoon" text, but nothing about what happened. I swirled the wine in my glass, watching the ruby liquid catch the fading light. "I think they're hoping if they act like nothing happened, I'll follow suit." "And would you?" Before all this, the question was astute, cutting to the heart of my dilemma. "Probably," I confessed. I spent my whole life smoothing things over, making sure no one feels uncomfortable. It's exhausting. "Then maybe this is an opportunity," James suggested, "to break that pattern." I considered his words as we finished our wine, watching dust settle over the historic city. Maybe he was right. Maybe this public humiliation was the push I needed to finally set boundaries with my family, to demand the respect I'd never felt empowered to require before. The question was how. Confrontation had never been my strong suit, especially with my father, whose dismissive confidence had a way of making me doubt my own perceptions. And my mother, the warmer than dad, had always deferred to his judgment in family matters. "I think I need to talk to Mark," I said finally. "Get his perspective." My older brother had always been somewhat removed from the family dynamics, focused on his own life in Seattle, where he worked as a software engineer. But he had attended the wedding with his wife Lisa and their infant daughter. He must have witnessed Dad's announcement. "That's a good idea," James agreed. He might have insights we're missing. When we returned to Chicago the following day, reality crashed back with jarring force. Our apartment was filled with wedding gifts waiting to be opened and thanked for. My email inbox overflowed with congratulatory messages alongside well-meaning inquiries about that awkward moment at the reception. Even our building storeman asked if I was doing okay with a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. News traveled fast, it seemed. That evening, after unpacking and ordering takeout, I finally worked up the courage to call my brother. "Well, if it isn't Mrs. Newlywed herself," Mark answered, his tone light. "How was Quebec?" "Beautiful, peaceful. Exactly what we needed." I hesitated, unsure how to broach the subject weighing on me. Mark saved me the trouble. "So, are we going to talk about Dad's toast from hell? Or pretend it didn't happen like Mom keeps insisting we should?" I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "You talked to Mom about it? Called her the day after your wedding. She gave me some nonsense about how you and James understood, and it wasn't a big deal. When I pointed out that publicly humiliating you at your own wedding was, in fact, a very big deal, she accused me of stirring up drama." "Sounds about right," I murmured. "Did she explain why they're giving Abby the money instead of me?" Mark snorted. "According to Mom, it's because Abby and Thomas need it more. Apparently his family isn't as well off as James's, and they want her to have her dream wedding." "James's family isn't wealthy," I protested. "They're comfortable, yes, but his dad is a high school teacher and his mom owns a small bookstore. They helped with the rehearsal dinner, but that's it." "I know that, and you know that. But Mom and Dad have convinced themselves that you married into money and therefore don't need their help." Mark paused. "There's something else, though. Something they're not saying." "What do you mean?" "I don't know exactly. Just a feeling." When I pushed Mom about the real reason, she got defensive and changed the subject. It was weird. I processed this information, thinking back to interactions with my parents in the months leading up to the wedding. Had there been signs I'd missed? Tensions I'd overlooked in the chaos of wedding planning? "Have you talked to Abby?" I asked briefly. "She seems genuinely upset about the whole thing. Says she tried to tell Dad not to make a big announcement, but he insisted it was better to be transparent." That sounded like my father defining transparency as whatever suited his purposes, regardless of who it hurt. "I'm not sure what to do now," I admitted. "Part of me wants to confront them directly, but another part thinks maybe it's better to just create some distance. For what it's worth, I think you need to have it out with them, Mark advised. Not in an explosive way, but clearly and firmly. If you don't, this will fester. Trust me, I've been dealing with Dad's favoritism a lot longer than you have. His words startled me. You think Dad favors me and Abby? Mark laughed, though there was little humor in it. No, Elle. I think he favors Abby. Period. You and I have always been in the same boat, the kids who have to earn every scrap of approval while Abby gets it just for existing. The assessment was harsh but rang true. I'd never discussed this dynamic explicitly with Mark, assuming his status as the only son gave him special standing with her father. Apparently not. How do you deal with it? I asked, suddenly eager for guidance from someone who understood. I moved 3,000 miles away in limited contact, he said bluntly. Not saying that's the right approach for you, but it's worked for me and Lisa. We see them twice a year, Max. Dad's on his best behavior because he knows I won't hesitate to cut a visit short if he starts his usual crap. The idea was both liberating and terrifying. I had always lived within an hour of my parents, had dinner with them at least monthly, called my mother weekly. The thought of such a dramatic reduction in contact felt like amputating a limb, painful, but possibly necessary for survival. I need to think about it, I said finally, and talk to James more. But thanks, Mark. It helps knowing I'm not crazy or overreacting. You're definitely not, he assured me. What Dad did was cruel and deliberate. Don't let them minimize it. After hanging up, I filled James in on the conversation. He listened thoughtfully, then asked, "What do you want to do?" "I think I need to talk to Abby first," I decided, before confronting Mom and Dad. "Are you sure that's wise? She might just relay everything back to them, maybe. But she's caught in the middle of this too." And her text seemed sincere. I chewed my lip, considering. Besides, I'd rather know if she was complicit or just a convenient excuse. The next day, I called my sister and suggested meeting for coffee at a neutral location, a small cafe halfway between her apartment in Wicker Park and mine in Lakeview. She agreed immediately, her relief palpable even over the phone. When I arrived at the cafe, Abby was already there, fidgeting nervously with her phone at a corner table. At 27, my sister had always been the beauty of the family, tall and willowy with her mother's honey blonde hair and her father's striking blue eyes. Today, however, she looked uncharacteristically disheveled. Her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles visible beneath her eyes. "Eleanor," she said, standing as I approached. She hesitated, then hugged me briefly. "Thank you for meeting me. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I admitted, sitting across from her. "No point in pretense now." Abby winced. "I deserve that. God, I'm so sorry about what happened at your wedding. I had no idea Dad was going to announce that." "But you knew about the decision? That they were giving you the traditional gift instead of me?" I kept my tone even, determined to remain calm regardless of her answer. "Not exactly." She twisted a napkin between her fingers, clearly uncomfortable. "Dad mentioned something a few weeks ago about helping with my wedding. More than they'd initially planned, but he never explicitly said it was coming from your gift. I assumed they were just, I don't know, dipping into savings or something." I studied her face, searching for signs of deception. Abby had never been a good liar. Her expressive features betrayed her too easily. Right now, she seemed genuinely distressed. "When did you find out the truth?" I asked. "During the reception. Right before Dad's toast." Her voice cracked slightly. "He pulled me aside and said he was going to clear the air about the wedding gift. I tried to tell him it wasn't the time or place, but you know how he gets when he's made up his mind." I did know. Our father's stubborn certainty was a family trait, one I'd unfortunately inherited, though I like to think I wielded it more judiciously. "So you had no part in this decision? You didn't ask them to redirect the money to your wedding?" "Absolutely not." Abby looked genuinely horrified. "Eleanor, I would never do that to you. I know we've had our issues over the years, but I'm not. I wouldn't." "Then why didn't you say something? After the toast, you just sat there." The hurt I'd been suppressing bubbled up, making my voice sharper than intended. Abby's eyes filled with tears. I was in shock. By the time I processed what had happened, you were already handling it so gracefully. And then the dancing started and I froze, thought it was cowardly. And I'm sorry. Her apology seemed sincere, but it did little to ease the ache in my chest. "Do you know why they really made this decision?" "Mark thinks there's something more going on." Abby hesitated, looking down at her untouched coffee. "I'm not sure. Dad's been weird ever since Thomas and I got engaged. Super involved in the planning, insisting on this big Italian wedding. It's not even what we want, not really." This was news to me. "What do you want?" "Something smaller. More intimate." She shrugged, a helpless gesture. Thomas's parents are divorced and barely speak to each other. A destination wedding with both families would be a nightmare. We'd rather put the money toward a down payment, like you and James. The irony wasn't lost on me. Have you told Dad that? Try to. He doesn't listen. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. Eleanor, I want you to know I'm not accepting that money. Thomas and I have already decided. We're going to tell them this weekend. I blinked, surprised by the unexpected declaration. Abby, you don't have to do that. This isn't your fault. Maybe not, but I can't build my future on something that hurt you so much. It wouldn't be right. Her resolve seemed genuine, a flicker of backbone I rarely saw in my people-pleasing sister. Besides, we're thinking of eloping. Just the two of us in Hawaii, maybe. The gesture touched me, though it didn't erase the hurt of the original slight. Dad will be furious, I warned. He's already announced his plans publicly. Let him be furious. I'm tired of everyone walking on eggshells around him. Abby's jaw set in a determined line that reminded me suddenly, startlingly, of our mother in her rare moments of defiance. Maybe it's time we all stopped letting Dad dictate everything. We talked for another hour, the conversation shifting from our parents to her engagement, my honeymoon, work and life. It wasn't a complete reconciliation to many years of complicated dynamics stood between us for that, but it felt like a step towards something healthier, a tentative alliance against the toxic patterns that had shaped our family for decades. As we parted outside the cafe, Abby hugged me again, longer this time. I am happy for you and James, you know. You deserve every good thing. So do you? I replied, surprised to find I meant it, walking home. I considered my next move. The conversation with Abby had clarified some things while complicating others. If she truly refused the money, would my parents offer it to me after all? Did I even want it anymore, tainted as it was by their conditional approval? And what about the deeper issue, the years of favoritism, of being valued less, of having my achievements minimized while Abby's were celebrated? A single conversation couldn't erase that history. Neither could $20,000. By the time I reached our apartment, I had made a decision. I would confront my parents directly, not about the money specifically, but about the pattern it represented. James was right. This was an opportunity to break the cycle of accommodation that had defined my relationship with my family for too long. I texted my mother, James, and I would like to have dinner with you and Dad this Saturday. There are some things we need to discuss. Her response came quickly. Lovely. I'll make your favorite lasagna. 6 p.m., the cheerful normality of her message, as if nothing had happened, strengthened my resolve. This conversation was long overdue. Saturday arrived with a mixture of dread and determination. James and I drove to my parents' suburban home in relative silence, each lost in our own thoughts. We had discussed our approach thoroughly. I would take the lead, but James would be there for support, and to prevent my father from dismissing my concerns as overly emotional or irrational, as he often did. Ready, James asked as we pulled into the familiar driveway. I took a deep breath. As I'll ever be? My mother greeted us at the door with her usual warmth, pulling me into a tight hug. There's a beautiful bride. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready. My father was in the living room, watching a baseball game. He muted the TV as we entered, standing to shake James's hand and kiss my cheek. How was the honeymoon? Quebec City in summer is supposed to be beautiful. The normalcy was surreal, as if the wedding reception had been a bad dream rather than a public humiliation. I forced a smile. It was lovely. The old city is charming. I made lasagna, Mom announced, ushering us toward the dining room, and garlic bread. Oh, and I picked up that tiramisu you like from the Italian bakery on Maple. All my favorites. A peace offering, perhaps, or an attempt to butter me up before an unpleasant conversation. Either way, the effort felt hollow given what had transpired. Dinner began with safe topics: the honeymoon, work, local news. My parents were careful to ask James questions about his job as a physical therapist, my mother refilling his wine glass solicitously. The performance of a perfect family dinner was so convincing that for a moment, I almost wavered in my resolve to confront them. Almost. As my mother cleared the dinner plates and brought out dessert, I set my napkin beside my plate and looked directly at my father. We need to talk about what happened at the wedding reception. The ambient sounds of the dining room, the clink of dessert forks, my mother's soft humming as she served the tiramisu ceased abruptly. My father's expression shifted from relaxed to guarded in an instant. I thought we might, he said, his tone carefully neutral. Though I'd hoped we could enjoy a nice dinner first. We've had a very nice dinner, I replied evenly. Now I'd like an explanation for why you chose to publicly announce that you're giving Abby the traditional wedding gift instead of me. My mother sat down quickly, her eyes darting between my father and me. Eleanor, honey, we didn't mean to upset you, really? Because announcing at my wedding reception that my sister deserves financial support more than I do seems designed specifically to upset me. That's not what I said, my father countered, his voice hardening. I simply explained our decision about allocating family resources. At my wedding, I repeated, in front of 300 guests, without warning me or James beforehand. Would you have preferred I lie? Pretend we were giving you the money when we'd already decided otherwise? I would have preferred you tell us privately, weeks before the wedding. Or better yet, treat all your children equally. I could feel my careful composure slipping, the hurt and anger I'd been containing threatening to spill over. James placed his hand over mine on the table, a silent show of support. My father noticed the gesture and frowned. This is a family matter, Eleanor. Perhaps we should discuss it privately. James is family now, I said firmly. And this affects him too. We had planned to use that money toward our down payment, based on the precedent you set with Mark. My mother interjected, her voice placating. Sweetheart, we just felt that Abby and Thomas needed the help more. James's parents are in a position to assist you if necessary. They've already been generous. But that's not the point, I said, frustration mounting. This isn't about the money itself. It's about what it represents. And what's that? My father challenged. That I'm less valuable to you. Less deserving. That my happiness matters less than Abby's. The words tumbled out. Years of accumulated hurt breaking through the dam of propriety I'd maintained for so long. That's ridiculous, my father scoffed. You're being dramatic. This was a practical decision, not an emotional one. Practical for whom? Certainly not for James and me. I leaned forward, holding my father's gaze. I want to understand, Dad. Help me understand why you would do this. A tense silence filled the room. My mother looked down at her untouched dessert, avoiding eye contact. My father's jaw worked as if he were physically restraining himself from speaking. Finally, my mother broke the silence. We didn't think you'd mind so much, she said softly. You've always been so independent, so capable of taking care of yourself. And that's a reason to withhold support. Because I've proven I don't need it? We're not withholding anything, my father interjected. We're allocating resources where they'll do the most good. Abby and Thomas are just starting out. You and James are established in your careers. We've been working for exactly the same amount of time as Abby and Thomas, James pointed out, his tone respectful but firm. The only difference is that Eleanor and I have been more financially responsible. My father's expression darkened at the implicit criticism. This isn't about responsibility. It's about need. Abby has always needed more support than Eleanor. That's just a fact. And there it was, the admission I'd been waiting for, though I suspected my father didn't even realize what he revealed. Abby had always needed more because they had trained her to need more, to expect more, to receive more. While I had been taught to expect less, ask for less, need less. I see, I said quietly. So I'm being punished for my independence, while Abby is rewarded for her dependence. No one is being punished, my mother insisted. Mom, I interrupted gently. Please don't try to sugarcoat this. I'm 31 years old. I deserve the truth. My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite decipher. Then my father sighed, setting down his fork with deliberate care. The truth is, Eleanor, we've always known you would be fine regardless of what we do. You've never needed us the way Abby does. And yes, perhaps we've taken that for granted. Perhaps we've relied too heavily on your resilience. But our decision stands. The honesty was both validating and devastating. My parents had withheld from me precisely because they believed I could withstand a perverse punishment for strength. I understand now, I said, rising from the table. James stood with me, his presence steady and reassuring. Thank you for clarifying. Eleanor, please, my mother began, her voice pleading. Don't leave like this. Like what, Mom? Calmly, maturely? Isn't that what you expect from me? I gathered my purse, fighting to maintain the composure they had always demanded. I'm not angry about the money anymore. I'm sad about what it represents. But I appreciate the honesty, finally. My father stood as well, his expression a complex mixture of frustration and something that might have been regret. Where does this leave us? It was a fair question. Where did this leave us? The relationship could never return to what it had been, the dutiful daughter accepting whatever scraps of approval were offered. But complete estrangement felt extreme, a nuclear option I wasn't prepared to deploy. I need some time, I said finally, to process everything, to decide what kind of relationship I want to have with you both moving forward. That sounds reasonable, my mother said quickly, relief evident in her voice. She clearly feared a more dramatic outcome. We'll still see you at family gatherings, of course. My father added, as if setting the terms of a business agreement, holidays and such. We'll see, I replied, unwilling to commit even to that much yet. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. As James and I drove home in the gathering dusk, A strange lightness filled my chest despite the emotional exhaustion of the confrontation. For perhaps the first time, I had spoken my truth to my parents without softening it to protect their feelings, without minimizing my own hurt to keep the peace. "I'm proud of you," James said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I admitted. "But it was necessary." "What happens now?" I gazed out the window at the familiar streets of my hometown, places laden with memories both sweet and painful. "I don't know exactly. But I know it will be different. Better, I hope. More honest, at least." And in that moment of uncertainty, I found an unexpected peace. The path forward wasn't clear, but for once I would be walking it on my own terms, not as a dutiful daughter, the responsible sister, the one who could be counted on to sacrifice, just as Eleanor, defining my own worth regardless of my family. And in that moment of uncertainty, I found an unexpected peace. The path forward wasn't clear, but for once, I would be walking it on my own terms, not as a dutiful daughter, the responsible sister, the one who could be counted on to sacrifice, just as Eleanor, defining my own worth regardless of my family's ability to recognize it. The following week brought an unexpected development. Abby called on Wednesday evening, her voice brimming with barely contained emotion. "I told them," she announced without preamble, "about refusing the money and planning to elope instead." "How did they take it?" I asked, settling onto our living room sofa. James glanced over from his desk, raising an eyebrow in silent question. "I mouthed Abby, and he nodded, returning to his work but clearly remaining attentive. "Dad exploded," Abby replied, a tremor in her voice suggesting she was still processing the confrontation. "Said I was being manipulated by you and Thomas. That I was throwing away a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. That I'd regret not having a proper wedding." "That sounds like Dad," I said, unsurprised, and Mom cried. Said she'd already started researching venues in Tuscany. Abby sighed heavily. But I stood my ground, Elle. For the first time ever, I didn't cave when Dad started ranting. Pride swelled unexpectedly in my chest. My little sister, finally finding her voice. "I'm proud of you, Abby." That took courage. Thomas helped. He was there with me. Said he'd rather elope than have a wedding that started our marriage with family tension. Her voice softened. "He's a good man. He sounds like it." I'd only met Thomas a handful of times, but he'd always struck me as genuine and thoughtful, qualities I hoped would serve Abby well in navigating life beyond our parents' influence. "Anyway," Abby continued, "there's more." After the screaming and crying died down, Dad said something weird. He said if I wasn't going to use the money properly, then it would have to go back to where it came from. I frowned. Back to where it came from? What does that mean? Their savings? I don't know. When I asked, he clammed up and said it wasn't important. The confusion in Abby's voice mirrored my own. Mom changed the subject really quickly after that. It was strange. "That is strange," I agreed, mentally filing away this new piece of the puzzle. "Did they say anything about giving the money to me and James instead?" "Actually, no. Not a word about redirecting it to you." Abby hesitated. "I'm sorry, Elle. I really thought they might." "It's okay. We don't need it." The words came out automatically. My lifelong habit of minimizing disappointment still hard to break. "I'm just curious about their reasoning at this point." After we hung up, I relayed the conversation to James, who looked as perplexed as I felt. "Back to where it came from," he repeated. "That's a bizarre way to phrase it, unless..." "Unless what?" James shrugged, thinking aloud. "Unless the money wasn't theirs to begin with. Maybe it's from a trust or something. An inheritance with conditions?" The theory had merit. It would explain why my parents couldn't simply redirect the funds to me after Abby's refusal, and possibly why they'd chosen Abby over me in the first place. If some external constraint was involved, I need to call Mark, I decided. He might know more about the family finances. My brother answered on the third ring, the sounds of his infant daughter fussing in the background. "Hey, Elle. There was shuffling, a door closing, then relative quiet. "Sorry. Lisa's got the baby now. What's up?" I explained Abby's conversation with our parents, and the cryptic comment about the money going back to where it came from. "Interesting," Mark said when I finished. "That actually aligns with something I've been wondering about." "What's that?" "Remember Grandpa Wilson's will? Dad's father." I cast my mind back to our grandfather's funeral 6 years earlier, vaguely. There was some issue with the distribution, right? Dad was upset, more than upset. He was furious. Grandpa left most of his estate to various charities, with only specific bequests to family members. Dad got the lake house and some stocks, but nothing like the inheritance he was expecting. This was starting to make sense. "So you think the wedding gift money comes from Grandpa's will somehow? A specific bequest for each grandchild? It would explain why they can't just redirect it however they want," Mark reasoned. If there were conditions attached. But why give Abby's portion to her and not mine to me? Mark was silent for a moment. I don't know. Maybe there's a time limit. Or maybe Dad's been dipping into funds he shouldn't have, and now he's trying to cover his tracks. The suggestion was troubling but not entirely implausible. Our father had always been secretive about finances, handling all money matters himself while keeping our mother in the dark about specifics. I need to find out for sure, I said, resolve hardening. If this money is actually mine by right, from Grandpa's will, that changes everything. How will you do that? Dad's not going to tell you voluntarily. I thought about it. I'm not sure yet, but I'm tired of operating in the dark. After ending the call with Mark, I sat in contemplative silence. James had overheard enough to grasp the situation. What are you thinking? He asked. I'm thinking I need to see Grandpa's will, I replied. And I know exactly who might have a copy. Aunt Helen, my father's younger sister, had always been a family record keeper. While Dad focused on climbing the corporate ladder, Helen had handled the details of our grandparents' final years, their medical care, and ultimately, their estate administration. She lived just outside Chicago in Evanston, a retired librarian whose meticulous nature extended to all aspects of her life. If anyone would have preserved important family documents, it would be Helen. I called her the next morning, arranging to visit that weekend under the pretense of dropping off a thank you gift for her wedding attendance. James offered to accompany me, but I decided to go alone, and Helen might be more forthcoming without an outsider present. Her craftsman bungalow looked the same as always, immaculate garden, wind chimes tinkling from the porch, bookshelves visible through every window. Helen greeted me with a warm hug. Eleanor, come in, dear. I've just made tea. In her cozy living room, surrounded by family photos including several of my wedding, I carefully broached the subject. Aunt Helen, I need to ask you something. About Grandpa's will. Her eyebrows rose slightly. That's an unexpected topic. Why the interest now? I explained the wedding gift situation, my father's strange comment to Abby, and Mark's theory about the money's origin. Helen listened intently, her expression growing increasingly troubled. I was afraid something like this might happen, she said finally, setting down her teacup with a decisive clank. Your father has never been good about respecting other people's wishes when they conflict with his own. She rose and disappeared into her home office, returning with a manila folder. Your grandfather knew this about his son. That's why he structured his will very specifically. Opening the folder, she extracted a document and pointed to a particular passage. Read this. The legal language was dense, but the meaning clear. Grandpa had established a trust for his grandchildren, with $20,000 designated for each upon their marriage or 35th birthday, whichever came first. The money was to be administered by the trustee, my father, but belonged rightfully to each grandchild. He's been withholding your inheritance, Helen said bluntly, and now he's trying to redirect Abby's portion to her while denying yours. It's not just unfair, it's potentially illegal. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just parental favoritism or a misguided financial decision. It was deliberate deception. What do I do? I asked, hands trembling slightly. Helen's answer was immediate. Confront him with evidence. I'm the backup trustee. I can provide documentation proving the money is legally yours. He'll be furious. Undoubtedly. But Eleanor, she leaned forward, grasping my hands, this pattern continues only if you allow it. Your grandfather wanted you to have this money. It's your birthright. I left Aunt Helen's with copies of the trust documents and a strengthened resolve. The dutiful daughter who accepted whatever scraps she was offered was gone. In her place stood a woman determined to claim what was rightfully hers, not just the money, but the respect that had been withheld for too long. That evening, I called my parents and requested a meeting, specifying that I'd be coming alone. There's something important we need to discuss, I told my mother, my voice calm but firm. Is everything all right? She asked, concern evident. It will be, I replied. After Sunday afternoon found me sitting across from my parents in our living room, trust documents neatly arranged in a folder on my lap. My father looked wary, my mother anxious. I visited Aunt Helen yesterday. I began without preamble. She showed me something interesting, Grandpa Wilson's trust documents. The color drained from my father's face. My mother looked confused. Richard, what is she talking about? Helen should mind her own business, he muttered, avoiding both our gazes. This is my business, I countered, opening the folder. These documents show that Grandpa left $20,000 trust for each of his grandchildren, to be distributed upon marriage or age 35. The money you announced you're saving for Abby isn't yours to allocate. It's my inheritance, my birthright. My mother gasped softly, turning to my father. Richard? Is this true? His jaw tightened defensively. It's more complicated than that. The family wedding gift tradition predates my father's ridiculous trust. I'm simply honoring our customs. By withholding my inheritance? By publicly humiliating me at my own wedding? My voice remained steady despite the anger coursing through me. That's not honoring anything except your own preferences. I've always done what's best for this family. He snapped. Your sister needs, stop. I raised my hand. This isn't about needs. It's about what's legally and ethically mine. I'm not asking for the money anymore. I'm informing you that I'll be contacting the trust administrator tomorrow to claim it directly. My mother began to cry quietly. My father's expression cycled through anger, defensiveness, and finally, resignation. You've changed, he said accusingly. Yes, I agreed. I stopped accepting less than I deserve. As I stood to leave, my mother caught my hand. Eleanor, please. We can fix this. The money is only part of it, Mom. The larger issue is the pattern it represents. I squeezed her hand gently. I need space to decide what kind of relationship I want with you both moving forward. One with boundaries and mutual respect, not conditional love. My father remained silent as I left, but the next morning, a bank notification appeared on my phone, $20,000 transferred from Wilson Family Trust to my account, with the memo line reading simply, your inheritance. 2 days later, a letter arrived not from my parents, but from my father alone. Inside was a single page of his distinctive handwriting. Eleanor, I have always been proud of your independence and capability. Perhaps too proud to recognize how my actions might be perceived as favoritism or disregard. I cannot undo the harm caused at your wedding, but I can acknowledge it was wrong. The trust money has been transferred as rightfully yours. Changing lifelong patterns will take time. I only ask for the chance to try. Dad, it wasn't an elaborate apology, but from my father, it was unprecedented. A beginning, perhaps. 6 months later, as James and I hosted our first Thanksgiving in our newly purchased condo, down payment assisted by my inheritance, I reflected on how much had changed. My relationship with my parents remained a work in progress, careful, sometimes awkward, but increasingly honest. Abby and Thomas had indeed eloped to Hawaii, returning to announce they were expecting their first child. And I had finally shed the burden of being the eternally accommodating daughter, learning instead to value myself regardless of external validation. When my father raised his glass in a toast, there was a new hesitancy in his manner, a recognition of past harm and present opportunity. To Eleanor and James, he said simply, "Thank you for opening your home and your hearts. We're grateful for second chances." It wasn't perfect. Real healing rarely is. But as I met his gaze across the table, I recognized something I'd never seen there before. Not just love, which had always been present in his own complicated way, but respect, and that, more than any inheritance, was worth claiming.